What's up, guys? Now that you've had sufficient time to perfect the Case 1 recovery, you're probably doing things like this now, right? If you haven't already, I suggest you watch my Case 1 recovery tutorial, as it goes over a lot of basics about getting on speed, HUD symbology, tack end setup, and other things of this nature. Since we'll be using all of these and more in this tutorial, it's highly recommended that you watch the other one first. You can get to it by clicking the link above in the top right corner of this video or in the description below. Okay, let's learn about Case 3. First, what does Case 3 mean? Case 3 exists when flights are expected to encounter instrument conditions during a departure or recovery because the ceiling or visibility around the carrier is lower than 1,000 feet and 5 nautical miles respectively, or for a night departure or recovery. Okay, so we know the conditions for a Case 3. But what's the difference between a Case 1 and a Case 3? In a Case 1, you have the ability to see the boat at all times. The weather's clear, it's like a nice sunny day at the beach. You enter the recovery pattern at a fast speed, do a few high G maneuvers, catch the wire, and you're done. In a Case 3, the boat is typically not visible due to weather or a nighttime operation. Because of this, it would be stupid to attempt a Case 1 because you'd probably slam into the back of the boat or into the water during your attempt. And the last time I checked, in real life, both of these result in having a bad day. Because of these conditions, a Case 3 recovery is essentially a really long 21 nautical mile boring straight in. Or so you would think. When I first started making this tutorial, it occurred to me that I had only ever done a low visible landing using ILS one time. It was in the F-15, it was over a year ago, and during my training days in RVE. And with it being so long ago, I really didn't remember how it all worked. So practicing the Case 3 recovery actually meant learning a few things for me, like how do I use the ILS or ICLS? How do I fly in IMC conditions using only my instruments? How do I settle that feeling in my stomach when I'm learning to fly IMC conditions only using my instruments? Is it just me, or does it just feel wrong? Now, we are going to go over how to do those things, but just not right this second. First, let's talk about how you enter the Marshall stack. To enter a Case 1 Marshall stack, you're supposed to fly into the 10 nautical mile bubble around MOM at your assigned altitude and at max fuel conservation speeds, also known as max E. However, in a Case 3, the Marshall stack is outside the 10 nautical mile bubble. So that begs the question, how do we enter it? Well, it's pretty simple. You can enter it from wherever, so long as you are at your assigned altitude and flying at max E by negative 10 degrees or positive 30 degrees from the radial that the stack is positioned on from MOM. Yeah, that's a mouthful. And if you understood that, you're doing better than I was when it was first explained to me. I had to ask a Navy pilot what this meant, and he sent me this. Does that help? You can basically think of the areas outside the red lines as the do whatever you want, just don't kill anybody zone. With the only one rule that you must descend or ascend in the correct side of the zone as illustrated. As explained to me, you would typically stay up at 30,000 feet until it was close to your push time to conserve fuel, instead of racing around the assigned circuit till you had to leave and go find a tanker. However, since this is DCS and that scenario never really applies, we can skip that part of the demonstration and move on to how we hold the pattern. As I said before, you can enter the pattern from anywhere, so long as you were at your assigned altitude and at max E ahead of time. Now that we know how to get to the Marshall stack, let's talk a little bit about what the Marshall stack looks like for a Case 3. The Marshall stack starts at a minimum altitude of 6,000 feet at a distance using the following equation. Assigned angels plus 15 equals distance. So, if you were the first in the stack and assigned angels 6, you would be at 21 DME. If you were assigned angels 10, you would be at 25 DME. If you were assigned angels 54, you would be at 69. Hopefully you get the idea. So let's take a look at how we would do this. Let's assume we were given a holding angels of 6 on MOM's 235 radial. First, we need to set up our tack end for MOM. Next, we set our course to the radial assigned to the Marshall stack. We'll fly towards the course line and intercept it somewhere before we are at 21 DME. You will want to be at max E and at your assigned altitude before entering the -10 to +30 radials around the holding radial. Once you're at max E and at altitude, you want to enter the Marshall stack from a position that allows you to get in the assigned radial before hitting your holding DME. Once we see our holding distance of 21 DME on the HUD, we will start our turn to begin the holding pattern. The published time for a holding circuit is 6-minute tracks. You can break these down into 2 1-minute 180-degree turns and 2 2-minute legs, which will total 6 minutes. However, all of this is allowed to change to ensure that you are at the end of the track on the holding radial at the proper push time. Now, I asked a Hornet driver how they typically fly the holding pattern and make their push time. This is the response I got. So then I asked, well, what angle of bank do you use when you're doing the circuits? And I got this response. Basically, if you need to wrap up a circuit, don't be a bitch. It's a fighter. Just do it. In the pattern, you want to try to have no more than a 30-degree angle of bank, and you typically will fly somewhere between 11 to 15 nautical miles away from your holding DME. Basically just feel it out. Time it. Start your first turn in the holding pattern, fly downwind in the pattern, then when you are at the 3-minute mark, turn around. It really isn't rocket science. Now, there is one thing I do want to point out. In this circuit, I tried to keep everything as straight as possible. I made my 180-degree turn, I flew downwind as straight as possible, and then I did my second 180-degree turn, and what you will see is midway through the turn, I actually fly over the course line. Now, the reason for this is that the ship is moving. I think I set this mission to have it running at about 25 knots. So while I was flying downwind in the pattern, the course line was getting closer and closer to my plane. And you can actually see this on the tack-end needle on the HUD. See what I mean? So you may have to make corrections here and there, and there really is no proper way to correct. Just make it happen. No one's going to judge you on how exact your holding pattern is, especially if you make it to the boat safely and when you were told. So do what you need to do in the pattern, at your altitude, and make sure that you get to the end of the circuit at your push time and everything should be fine. Now, Once established in the holding pattern, let's run through a quick checklist and set up for our recovery. You want to check that your hook bypass is on carrier, your anti-skid is off, your ICLS has set frequency, hook is down, your landing light is off, and you want to box ILS on the HSI. Your radial should already be set to 5,000, but it's a good idea to double check it. Now that we're in our holding pattern, let's look at how we're going to exit for our approach and get on the carrier. There are two kinds of approach charts for Case 3 recoveries. The first one is the one that most of you have either seen or tried and is referred to as CV1 TACAN and looks like this. The second one is referred to as CV2 TACAN overhead and looks like a teardrop. CV2 is a contingency, and all of the pilots I've talked to have stated that they've never flown it anywhere except in a sim. So for today, we're going to focus on the CV1 approach only. Now let's talk a bit in detail about how to read this chart. The top is a diagram of an overhead view of what the Case 3 recovery looks like. On the bottom, we have a side profile of the same diagram you see above. This is where we are now, and as we follow the dotted line to the ship, you will see 3 DME references: 10 DME, 6 DME, and 3 DME. The numbers above basically mean when the equipment you are using to measure distance to MOM, in our case a TACAN, reads 10, 6, and 3 DME, there is more information on the approach plate below the diagram for those distances. If we move our focus to the approach plate, we can see our descent line from Marshall stack on final bearing. At 10 DME, we see a 1200 with a line above and below. This is our ceiling and floor at 10 DME, which means we are to hold 1200 AGL and go no higher and no lower. At 6 DME, we again see the same 1200 with a line above and below, so we will hold 1200 again. Now at 3 DME, we see 1200 feet, but you see this 600 foot? Ignore it. 99% of the time, it's 1200. In cases where you're doing ASR, you might be directed to a lower altitude. This is just not common. For this tutorial, we will ignore the 600 foot mark and we will stay at 1200 feet. At 3 DME, we're going to intercept the ICLS and begin our descent to the boat. Now the approach chart doesn't have the following DMEs that I'm going to give you, but these are some numbers for you to remember in case you're doing the approach without ICLS. You should be at 1010 feet at 2.5 DME, 880 at 2, 660 at 1.5, 440 at 1, or around calling the ball. This puts you a ball or two high, so you'll have to work that down as you do your approach. Luckily for us, ICLS isn't something that fails in DCS, at least in any mission I have seen yet. But maybe this information is helpful for somebody. Somebody makes a mission later on where this occurs. Who knows? Now let's get back to exiting our holding pattern. First, we are going to adjust our radial to the final bearing radial of the ship. This is the radial where we are going to land and not BRC. This number is 10 degrees less than BRC, and mission makers should be held responsible for putting this information in their briefing. To get to this radial, we will want to make the transition to it somewhere after we exit the Marshall stack, but before 10 DME. Once we exit, we will start our descent to 1200 feet. When we start our approach, we will be above 5,000 feet, and while above 5,000 feet, we will descend with boards out and at idle power at a minimum of 4,000 feet per minute, which is around 8 degrees nose down. Once we pass 5,000 feet, we will hear our radial go off. We will want to bring in our boards, stay power idle, and slow our descent to somewhere around 2,000 foot per minute or 4 degrees nose down. The goal is to get to 1,200 feet by 12 DME. During this transition, you can see that I also transitioned to final bearing. Basically, you can start this turn to put the radial perpendicular to your heading. At this point, it is also a good idea to set your rad alt to 370 feet for landing. And when you see your tack end needle start to move towards your velocity vector, you can start the turn into the final bearing radial. Once you are close, arrest your descent and level out at 1200 feet. At 8 DME, we will go ahead and commence transition to a landing configuration and get on speed. Now the fun begins. We get to hold this altitude on speed for about 5 DME. You heard me. We'll just sit here, jog the throttle slowly, kinda like that creepo looking in your window right now. Did you look? Be honest. You looked, didn't you? Now, if we do some quick maths, we have 7 nautical miles to go at approximately 130 knots. Carry the 1, drop the remainder, square root of pi over 7 minus 12. Yep, just what I thought. I have about 2 minutes to explain ICLS. ICLS, or Instrument Carrier Landing System, allows the pilot to get a visual reference of the glide slope to the carrier during an approach. For all intents and purposes, the ICLS is an ILS. The visual reference consists of 2 needles, 1 vertical, 1 horizontal. The vertical needle moves left and right based on your lineup to the runway, and the horizontal needle moves up and down based on your position within the proper 3.5 degree glide slope to the offset deck. The goal is to keep both needles intersecting your velocity vector during the entire descent to the deck. This is called flying the needles or following the bullseye. If you are left of the lineup, the vertical needle will be on the right, indicating that you must move right. And if you are on the right of the lineup, it will be on the left. The horizontal needle will appear above your velocity vector if you are lower than the glide slope, and below the velocity vector if you are above it. If the vertical needle is to the right, reference your course line on the HSI and make minor adjustments and give it time to come over. Same with the horizontal needle. The only tip I can say here is that the ICLS is not a flight director, but only a representation like you'd get on a normal ILS, and you don't want to chase the needles. If you make large adjustments and throw your velocity vector over a needle, it will slide to the other direction faster than you can keep up. It'll cause you to look like you're having a seizure in the cockpit while you're trying to land. Here comes 3 DME. Wow, impeccable timing. Now we are at 3 DME. We can start making our adjustments to keep the ICLS needle in the proper position and follow the bullseye in. Remember, the instruments have preferences at different DMEs, but basically, the entire approach, you follow the TACAN till you intercept the ICLS, and then you follow the ICLS till you call the ball. Then you follow the ball to the deck. Once we can make out the ball, we call the ball and use it from here on out to fly all the way down to the deck. Hornet ball 2.7. Just like any other carrier landing, the ball is king, use it. Okay, so that's it, right? You will probably jump into DCS now, load up a mission, and nail this on your first attempt. I have faith. I'm sure each and every one of you will get this on your first try. But, well, you know, just to cover all the bases, what do you do if you bolter or get waved off during an approach? I am glad you asked. If you bolter, you want to climb straight ahead on final bearing to 1200 feet. Gear up, half flaps, keep your speed at 150 knots. At 4 DME or 2 minutes upwind, make a left-hand turn to downwind. Report a beam if necessary. At 4 DME, commence turn to approach, dirty up and get on speed. Intercept ICLS at 3 DME, this time catch the wire, it's easy. If for some reason you cannot turn in at 4 DME, you can try again the following: 6 DME, dirty up halfway through the turn, or 8 DME, dirtying up when you intercept final bearing. Now, that's it. Hopefully this helps you guys figure out how to do Case 3 recoveries. And remember, it's easy, it's just a 21 nautical mile straight in landing. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below or hit me up on my personal or Splash One Gaming Discord. Both can be found in the description below. Thank you for watching, and remember to hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll catch you guys next time.